Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to a very special edition of Cloud Talk. I'm Seow Wei, the Southeast Asia editor for Gen.T. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So we have planned a very exciting discussion, I hope, to talk about what skills leaders need these days and also how the pandemic might have made certain skills more important than others. So you might be wondering what is the connection between Valentino, Gen.T as well as leadership. So most of us are aware of the Valentino aesthetic. It's modern as well as very beautiful to see and touch. Driving that actually is a brand that really treasures craftsmanship and creativity, but also self-expression, diversity, inclusivity, as well as innovation. So first up, seated next to me is Vincent Ha. So Vincent is the CEO of Lyte Ventures, which is a financial solutions company that works mostly with freelancers and SMEs. So Vincent is also the co-founder of Gushcloud International, which some of you might know is a global influencer, entertainment, and talent acquisition company. So next to him is Mark Wee. So Mark has been helping the Singapore Gen.T team to nominate and vet names for the Singapore list, the Singapore Gen.T list, if some of you are familiar with, because I think most of our audience are from the Gen.T list. So he's been helping us for the last 2 years doing that. Your main job is actually Executive Director of DesignSingapore Council. But Mark is really a multi-hyphenate. He is also an architect, an artist, a designer, as well as an educator.
And a dad.
And a dad. So seated next to Mark is Errol. Errol is the co-founder and COO of Jublia. So Jublia is a business matching and events data analytics platform that works with a variety of events and clients globally. Okay, let's jump right into the discussion. So this past year and a half has been really a roller coaster ride for everyone. But I would imagine it's been a tougher ride for people like the three of you who are leading and running businesses. What do you think are some of the biggest takeaways, professional takeaways, that you have really gleaned from this crisis? Maybe we can start with you, Vincent.
I think everyone knows that obviously the biggest difference between normal work and pandemic time work is that you don't really see your colleagues every day, right?
Yeah.
Or at least for us, our default has been work from home for the last, even before the pandemic. I think when we heard of it coming out from Wuhan, we started practicing work from home. So it's almost been since February last year.
Wow.
Right, so it's quite interesting because I think the beginning part was traditional mindset, right? Boss doesn't see the workers, our workers working kind of thing, right? But I think my biggest takeaway in the last 1.5 years or so doing this is that it's simply not true, right? Just because we don't see the work doesn't mean people aren't working harder. In fact, it's converse, right? People are actually working longer hours. You look at the data, you say people are staying logged in and all that. So it's become a different take. It's more like how do we encourage people to find balance, working from home, yet contributing to the company, right? So that's been quite a big kind of like mind blown. Actually, people work really hard at home. But that also gives me the confidence that one day when we go global, when we expand, it's okay if we don't see our colleagues ever, right, in terms of physical, but we can trust and believe that they will continue to work hard as long as we as leaders continue to put the right frameworks like culture, regular cadences of meetings in place. The workers or the colleagues will do their job. Right, so that's been the biggest takeaway for me and a big confidence booster for me, especially when it comes to working remotely. Yeah.
Errol, I think you might have something to comment on that because Jublia is mostly working with remote workers, right? What are some of the takeaways with, the situation now? Has there been a big difference for you or is it quite natural, a progression?
Well, yes, we have a global team, right? So Jublia runs an international business. We've got people based in Egypt, we've got people based in Brazil, we've got people based in Canada and different parts of the United States. So yes, the remote culture is very strong in Jublia. And when the pandemic hit, for a while it felt like everything was normal still, because remote culture. Just that I couldn't meet my Singaporean colleagues. But I totally agree with what Vincent said, the longer working hours, the fact that you're always online and reachable 24/7, and there needs to be some control to that.
Boundaries set.
Some boundaries set, yeah, exactly. You need to know how to turn it off, you need to know how to compartmentalize. And I think as leaders, one of the things is also us being and showing care and concern to our colleagues, and making sure that they are in the right frame of mind. Now, regards to my professional takeaway based on this, as a tech company and in the event sector that has been disrupted quite a lot, I think Charles Darwin said it quite right in one of the quotes. He said it's not the strongest or the fittest that survive, but it's the one most adaptable to change.
Yep.
And I think right now in this pandemic, I've actually seen a lot of companies in my sector that have gone bust. Events, because physical events can't take place, right? So it's gone bust as well. And that leads me again maybe to another quote from Alvin Toffler, who's an American futurist and writer. He mentioned the illiterate of today will not be people who can't read and write, but people who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn.
So for me, quite different. I mean, my organization, about 60 over people, we run and we are based at the National Design Center. So we are used to being in office every day, having this building that we steward, and then sort of, having that kind of office life, lunchtime and all those things. At least that's what many people. And this really kind of took things apart, right? You can't meet each other. You are probably, if you are new, which a lot of people onboarded in the last year or so, you may never really meet your colleagues, or at least the full extent of this team you represent. And trust, and yet work needs to be done, right? In fact, actually more work needed to be done, because at least within the government, we're trying to help kind of the industry and our stakeholders and all that. So trust was super important. The other thing I learned was communication. This issue of you can't communicate enough, right? And that's not, and that's something that I had to learn, right? So I think I some of these things, it kind of brought me to do some things that I didn't do before, like put time aside to write to them, right? Even if I can't see everyone, I started scheduling just even weekly, half an hour, just times with my directors, no agenda, just to have space to talk, right?
To catch up,
Right, just to catch up, not about, okay, what you have to get through. And then the third one was really around vulnerability, right? Because everyone, like you said, right, everyone, when you don't see what people are doing, you assume you just have to kind of keep on going and do your best and all that. And if no one shows any sort of vulnerability, generally people don't do that. But I think people really appreciate when you say, hey, you know what, it's hard for me. And I say that because I wrote, at the start of this year, I wrote my team a kind of long email, sort of just giving them a heads up of what to expect for the year, just what I felt was coming on board. I mean, the end of it was basically, I think a lot of things will surprise us this year, just to be prepared for anything. And I was just sharing how hard the year was personally on certain fronts and all that. And the feedback I got from people was, we really appreciated you just telling us it was really hard. And I'm like, wow, right? That was the one that stood out, right? So I think these things that were important before, I think really got accelerated.
Yep.
So how are you guys practicing workplace wellness during this time specifically?
It all boils down to certain fundamentals like communication, right? Very simple stuff, right? On a call, hey, where's this report? Or how are you doing, right? Spend the first 5 minutes saying, how's everything at home, right? Hear some noise, like you hear, let's say, kids in the background. Hey, is that your son? Is that your daughter? How are they doing?
Yeah.
Right? Let's turn on the video, and we don't have to keep the video for the entire duration of the call, but I want to see you. I've not seen you in a while, right? So that kind of peace of mind and that kind of kindness that you extend. One of the things that Jublia has done is we very recently hired a people's happiness manager.
Oh,
Right?
Oh.
Oh.
We still do not know what that person's going to do.
But you've hired the person already.
We've got this
That's
role.
very
I
cool.
still do not know what this person's going to do, so I'm very excited, right? It's one of my co-founders who decided to spearhead this, and 100% super excited about that. Well, I'll probably learn more from you what have you guys been doing to promote wellness in your teams?
Yeah, Vincent,
I
what
think
about you?
for us, I mean, my experience is usually people look to what the leaders are doing, right? So if the leaders are working at 12 a.m., they think that that's the expectation. I should work until 12 a.m. If leaders are the first one sending an email, replying emails at 6, 7 a.m. in the morning, that's the kind of the culture and expectation they set, right? So because of that, one of the things that my co-founder and I have been quite mindful of is to not set the wrong behavior or expectation. So what that means is that as an entrepreneur, your tendency is to want to respond fast. You see an email at 10 p.m., you're like, okay, I'm going to respond, right? But I think what has been changed in the last year and a half is just being slower, right? Deliberately just going, actually, you know what? It's perfectly fine if I reply tomorrow, right? So that at least I set expectations to my colleagues that actually it's okay if you enjoy your weekend, right? And when I do have to reply in the weekend, usually what I do these days, I preface the statement first, like, hey guys, I'm just putting it here for us to take note, but I don't expect you to reply. You can reply on Monday, right? And just let it be, right? And in the beginning, people didn't get the hint. People still respond at 9 p.m. and all that. So what I do is I don't respond to them, right? So they will blast a message back at 9 p.m. I'll just not respond. And slowly after that, people finding the balance and all that. So I think that's been quite good for even myself, because I'm a father of 3. Good for a lot of fathers and mothers in the organization. So everyone now understands and appreciates when the company says people first, that we care for people. We mean it like we mean by showing that actually we don't expect you to work beyond certain hours.
Yeah.
We trust that you get the work done in whatever time frame. And just that feeling of trust. It's one thing to say, I trust you, right?
Yeah.
But it's the actions like that show like we don't message them, hey, is this thing done yet or not? I think things like that makes people really believe that, oh yeah, actually, Vincent and the bosses do trust that I'm going to take care of this area.
So
What
you
about-
don't reply straight away because people would freak out. So,
No, before I reply, I mean, they don't do that today, but before I reply, I ask myself, do I need to do it now?
Oh.
And if I do it now, what message am I sending to the team?
Wow.
Am I telling them to respond immediately, or do I just want them to know? Or, so
Interesting.
it's a bit of a habit now. I just, okay, do I really need to tell them now, right? Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite. To be honest, I mean, the issue about different work styles and how you accommodate is something I've been thinking about. I wouldn't say the opposite, but I think what I've come to realize is that people have different work styles, right? And in some ways, also now working from home, people have the ability to kind of like almost shape their life, right? To really kind of balance what is important at home at the same time when they can work and all that. And it will vary for different people, right? And I think for us, what we've tried to do is to just communicate that to each other, right? So I take for example, right? Like I have a young family. So what that meant finally was that lunchtime I could pick up my daughter from school, which could never happen. But at the same time, right, once she's in and as long as she's up before she sleeps, generally, we'll be spending time. But then when everyone goes to sleep, then I kind of get work done. And my own personality is I tend to think more at night.
Same.
But if I put it out, some people who are different, they'll be like, oh, are you saying I have to reply? And I'm like, no, I don't. I just say that's just what I need to do, but I'm not. So I felt that the only way to get around those things are basic conversations.
So you tell them that this is how you work.
Yeah, and
but
I'm
that's not your
like, when you get that email, you are not meant to answer on the spot, right? Right? It's just the way I need to unpack. And then basically, and as long as there's communication, then there's no offense, right?
Yeah.
Because people will be like, yeah. And then I think another one is really, I think, trust is important because, to be honest, the only way to understand how people feel is if people who are close to them actually are aware. Because you can never figure it out, right? And that enough trust where people are willing to say, you know what, I'm really struggling. I think you need you need an environment for those things to be totally cool with, yeah.
Do you find it difficult as a leader to create or to ensure that there is open channels of communication?
So there's first run what you do on your own, right? Because people take reference, right? So I think people are obviously observant. They will look at you to say that what you say, does that correspond in action, right? So if you say something and then you say, oh, you know what, you can be totally open to me, and then someone shares and then all of a sudden, they're put in a difficult spot because of what, then people will be like, okay, you know what, you're not really true. So that's one, what you do on your own, and that has to be kind of authentic because you can't hide that word will spread. Then the second one is really around what you want out of those whom you lead, right? And that's really then, because they're not you can share. Hopefully, if you treat them a certain way, they can also feel that they have the ability to treat people a certain way. And if not, you have to call them out. But it's just how you do it. You just need to do it graciously, right?
I mean, I second what Mark says about it's what you do, right? So I mean, if you tell your guys and folks that, hey, open communication, any feedback come to me, right? But the moment they bring you feedback, your first response is like, no, defensive, and you kind of like, chide them or you ignore them or even reject their ideas, then that sends a signal, right? Oh, so next time I talk to you, this is the expected response. Therefore, you're telling me that I shouldn't bring you the feedback, I shouldn't bring you open communication, right? So it was a bit of a challenge, right? So I mean, I had that. When we start out, we design a culture. Okay, we want to be open, flat. People can give feedback. But then the question for us as ourselves as leaders is when the feedback does come, how will you respond to it, right?
Yeah.
So in the beginning it was tough. Like someone would come to me like, "Hey Vince, here's some feedback." And I got like, part of me is like, "Oh, it's very uncomfortable to hear feedback." But then part of me thinks about it, it's like, "Oh, but this is what I want. I want you to tell me so I can grow as well. So I'm gonna take it in good spirit. I'm just saying I appreciate it. Thank you for it." And it's also a bit of a stress point. Like you talk about Shaq cannot show, right? It's one of those things where because we are in that position, we know that okay, sometimes it really hurts. Sometimes you go like you listen to something, go like, I disagree with you, but because I want to create a culture where you can tell me this, even though it makes me uncomfortable, I have to be mature about it. I have to thank you for it, and I have to accept that you have a viewpoint that I should consider, right? Yeah. And then when people see that, okay, you mean what you say. When you say open, you actually do take it in. And then it will show in the reviews later on. When they say, how do you describe me as a leader? What are my weaknesses and strengths? And they say that, you're open, your feedback, great. At least you've kind of done the job and set that culture in place.
Yeah.
But it's also being able to deal with the discomfort of that openness ourselves.
It comes with the role, right, as a leader, to feel a little bit of discomfort. Right?
I mean, most of us, I'm sure, here will feel some imposter syndrome.
Funny, I just thought about that actually. But just adding on to both of your points, I think one of the things that's important is to have proper rules of engagement, right?
Yeah.
Proper rules of engagement. So if somebody comes to you with a feedback, it's not just bam, 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 there is a proper way to do it, right? A feedback system. I think I've had not massive success, but I had a little bit of success, which I hope to expand on, is setting the right values and culture for the company. So one of the values that we have in Jublia is open, honest, and direct communication. And this prose that actually outlines the values, there is a portion that says, we know that it's human to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And when we make mistakes and we tell our teammates, we know we will be forgiven. Right? And so that's one of it, right? And of course, another part of it, it's another value that we have is positivity and accountability, because positive begets positive, and accountable means you got to be responsible for your stuff. And so, the open, honest, direct culture, probably is that feedback culture. The positive and accountability, in some sense, what we're trying to instill is a performance-driven culture.
Yeah.
Because if it's performance-driven, you can be replying your emails or not. I don't care, as long as at the end of the day there is progress in whatever project you're working on, then all's well. So yeah, but this is indeed not an easy topic, and I think on leaders it can be quite draining. Right. So there is a lot of self-love that we also need to do sometimes for ourselves.
So before COVID-19, we already saw kind of a shift in what people were looking for in jobs. So like, for example, in, I think, Deloitte's global survey recently that was released, they studied millennials and Gen Zs. And they said that millennials and Gen Zs are more likely to work with companies whose values and actions actually align with their own. So on company values and culture, just now you were mentioning, how relevant do you think setting these values and culture is the responsibility of leaders? And how much do you think can actually be set from bottom up?
Oh, 100%. It needs to be set by the leaders, 100%, right? If you do not set the boundaries, again, back to the rules of engagement, at least you need to plant the seeds, right? And my wife is great at keeping plants, and we have this particular creeper, right, that we keep.
That's
right?
even a name.
Oh, man, she's going to watch this and she's going to say, you don't know the name to the plants I keep?
Creeping
right?
plant.
Very, very bad. Okay, we have a few plants. One of them is a yayoi and another one is a creeper, right? Can't for the love of God right now remember that name. But, when it grew, she literally had a plan. She said,
Oh, wow.
I'm going to grow it here. It's going to grow up here. From here, it's going to attach the wall. And then this is the path I've charted for it.
Damn.
And right now, it's up to my waist, and it starts from ground, it's up to my waist right now. And right now, the roots are latching onto the wall.
Oh.
Nice.
What I'm trying to say is that in the same way for leaders, right, we need to plant the seed.
Yeah.
And this plant will grow by itself, right? You can't control it, right? You just water it here and there.
Yeah.
And then occasionally you'll have to shift it a bit, place it onto the wall, allow the roots to get acquainted to the wall, and then it would find its own footing and realign it here and there. So back to just to answer your question, I feel that leaders are 100% involved, but so are the colleagues and the rest of the team in shaping this culture. And it's actually them and their involvement that actually makes this process fun. Yeah.
It's one thing to behave, which we ought to, but we also do need to codify it, right? We need to write it down.
Yeah.
Something I learned last time, I used to think that, you just take it for granted, right? People just get it.
Yeah, no.
But actually, no, people don't get it. Right? You got to write it down. You write it down and you see, okay, does this make sense? Can I observe these behaviors, or are they just like airy-fairy statements, right? So, that's where, if you write it down and it can't be observed, probably it's not a great prose or statement. But you write it down and it's actually instructing people, okay, I kind of understand what you're expecting from me and how I'm supposed to behave, and probably you're getting the right steps, right? And there's a lot of what we've been doing. Like, I think to echo your point about writing, right?
Yeah.
And one thing about the pandemic that I noticed is I started writing a lot more. So writing a lot more to my team, writing about strategy, writing about culture, writing about to them individually, writing down feedback, writing down good points. And actually that's been a really, in my opinion, a healthy habit I picked up, right? Because when I write it down, I can actually look back on my thoughts and go like, hey, actually, this is an erroneous thought I thought about that one time. What has changed? Okay, facts have changed. Put it down here. Or it could be something as writing down someone's feedback. Because we're communicating, we're on the virtual conference call, and then I can type it down. And it's been very instructive for me, right? Then sometimes you get a gem here and there and realize, hey, actually this is pretty cool. Maybe this can be a broader part of our culture. You can highlight to the guys in town, hey guys, this is what happened, I think it's great behavior, let's practice that, right? So I think over time, while we initially as leaders set it up, right? Everything is fundamentally from the leaders, right? The analogy I'll give here is parenting, right? If you see a naughty kid running around an MRT train, you can probably guess what kind of parent or kind of family they're in, right? And it's both good, bad, and also lack of, right? Some people unfortunately don't have the full family or the parenting. It's the same thing for company. You see people being toxic, right? Talking bad behind each other's back. You probably can infer or guess that somewhere along that chain, some leader is doing something like that, right? And their behavior is perpetuating, right? So in that sense, as leaders, we set the tone. But to the bottom-up question of it, one of the things I do share with my team is that as we expand, as we grow, we have to expect that culture will break. It's a presumption. It's not like, yes, you believe in a good culture today, but you have to presume that it's going to keep breaking, but it should break better. It should break apart and form. When it reforms, it should be better. Because if you're going to bring in talented people who are very diverse, who have divergent thoughts and all that, it's perfectly fine, right? They could have totally different views to you, they could be behaving a different way. But as long as we are all aligned on the same mission, in that sense, and same values, right? Yep. The culture will keep breaking, but somehow it will keep getting stronger. And to Errol's point, that's what I noticed. In the beginning, we thought only A, B, C, but someone comes along, brings in D, and that just makes the culture a lot richer. And then it starts taking your life its own, and that's quite fun. It's quite fun to observe because it's not something that you came up with.
What would you say is the attributes of a successful leader? So, there are multiple studies out there, and quite a lot of them actually say that one of them is to be emotionally intelligent, so to have EQ. So I think that means to be able to perceive or to use, understand, and to manage emotions that are either your own or others. What do you guys think?
For myself, I have a very simple golden rule. It's something that my other co-founder for Gushcloud taught me.
Althea?
Yes, Althea taught me this. Is basically leaders fundamentally just need to care.
Yeah.
Right? And care about what, right? So fundamentally, you need to care about people, right? Then after that, you need to care about culture, then you need to care about products, so in that kind of like outwards manner, right? But as a leader, if you touch your heart, you really can't bring yourself to care for people. That's something to really work on. So that's actually honestly been my growth journey, right? In the past, I used to think that being a good leader just means paying salary on time, giving good bonuses, making sure people have career progression, very task focused, right? I actually realized that actually being a good leader is, hey, how are you today? You look like you're a bit troubled. You want to talk about it? Being there a little bit there for them, just giving them the space, caring enough to know that maybe sometimes it's not just about money for them. Maybe they just want good feedback, kind of improve, right?
Being a caring person.
It's a high standard, right? Because every day I look at it, I don't really care.
It's a simple trait, but a very difficult one to achieve.
Because people are difficult and people are different from you, right? So to care means you're like, I disagree, but I really have to understand your point because I want to understand why you say it that way, so that I
Yeah.
can empathize and connect with you on that point.
Empathy, right?
Yeah, but it's
Be
just
able to put
difficult
yourself
because
in
we're
that
all
person's
different
shoes.
people, right?
So I think lead by example has been ingrained with me a lot, right? On the whole emotional quotient and having empathy, that's huge. But I think when I first started out, in the working world, people with higher EQ, I felt made better leaders. But I've actually rubbed shoulders with a lot of leaders who actually do not have very high EQ, and I still respect them pretty madly, in how they have done. So I think I'll give you two things that I feel that are very important for leaders apart from the lead by example and the EQ, right? One would be a leader should identify the strengths in others, and I think you should know how to help this person hone their strength. Now, honestly, if I was tone deaf, I can't sing, right? Even if you're like, hey, you can't sing, well, we're gonna get the best vocal coach to coach you how to sing, and you're gonna be great. You won't be great. Maybe you'll be good, but for a person with a natural singing talent, right? You can't compete with that. So it's more of like if you see a person with a skill that's unrefined, and you can see this person's, you can groom this person for greatness. There's that potential, right? Don't worry about the weakness. We'll try to find something to support that. But you are right now you have a natural ability. Let's take this ability and let's shoot for the moon. And if we can't hit the moon, we'll fall on the stars. Actually, it's the other way. Shoot for the stars and fall on the moon, right? But that's one. And I think the other thing which I think is very important quality is actually humility. All right, when you're in a position of power, it's very easy to abuse it, right? You can, right? For those of you in military, it's like, wow, this officer play rank, right?
Not in NS lah.
Not in NS lah. One's the reverse. No, wow, this man play rank. He's civilian. But you get what I'm saying. So the humility part is a very important as well, in my opinion.
I may
think you
misquote it,
once-
but I think it's Jack Ma or someone who was saying something about IQ. Basically, just if you really have high IQ, then you'll be able to figure things out. And that's something like EQ, right? And people will probably be more willing to relate to you. But he talked about this thing called love quotient, right?
Love quotient.
Right. So he mentioned, so there's intelligence, there's emotional, and then they talk about love quotient. And he says if you have that, actually, people will kind of like will fight for you, right? Or people would really kind of like go the extra mile. And I think there's something in that, right? This idea of, I think out of that comes care, right? Out of that comes this really kind of concern. But I think the thing when people talk about those words, right, it's very easy to dismiss it as, oh, are you just being a nice person? No, it's not, right? I mean, love is actually knowing when to be firm, when things need to be at the same time being very gracious, right? When you can. I mean, there's so many ways to kind of unpack that. So I think that's what a leader is. It's not formulaic, that person needs to understand the sort of situation and what's the best way to kind of honor the person in it, but yet address the situation, not sort of beat around the bush, not tolerate things because you're not willing to address. I think those are the things people want, right? Rather than just be one-dimensional and just, I'm going to stick to things that don't make sense and all that. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room, but if you have that, actually, you could go a pretty long way, right? Because you can always hire people smarter than you. Yeah. And then I think to your point around humility, I mean, kind of another related word to that is this idea of meekness. Means it's because if you're the leader in it, the truth is that people have to listen to you, right? Short of you kind of saying, right, putting your foot down, right? It's just, do you really need to use that all the time, right? No, it's really then out of that position, how can you actually help the organization? How do you help serve the people that you're working with and all those things? How do you use that to bring impact? That's what people, I feel, respect. Then as opposed to a power trip, right? Yeah.
So just now you mentioned that the leaders don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room, right? And I think I spoke to you about this before, Vincent. That's not something that you also truly believe in, right?
I used to think that I needed to be the smartest person in the room until I realized that, you don't have to.
Until one of your leaders told you that you know all the answers and that's not necessarily a good thing, right?
I mean, it's humility, right? If Vincent knows it all, then actually I don't need to tell him anything, you know it, right? Then people feel like they just shut up around you.
I mean, things are so complicated these days. You won't figure, I mean, it's not so clear, and good ideas get refined when kind of sharing it and discussing it and adding to it. I mean, I'm just saying, this is gone are the days where the guys like looking at everything. Okay, I got it figured out. This is exactly what we're gonna do, and you just listen to me. I don't think it's so easy. these days.
I don't know about what's your experiences hiring, but actually in recent months, actually, surprising number of candidates that have been interviewing, they've all mentioned this same reason why they're leaving their current workplace, and that is that they feel burnt out.
Oh, yeah.
They feel burnt out, they feel that their leadership doesn't care for them, and they feel they just want to move on to a place where they can find a better culture, right? And it's not just millennials, I mean, it's across a bunch of ages, but
Yeah.
I don't know if it's related to just the pandemic, or is it a sign of the times that people now are more than money, they want to find purpose, meaning. But I mean, notice it enough that out of like several interviews, like came out 5-6 times. Oh wow, it's burnout is such a huge reason people feel these days.
Yeah.
Therefore, as leaders, we also need to be aware that if this is the reason why people leave, chances are if we are creating that pressure and environment for our folks, maybe some of them will pack up and leave as well.
I mean, it's quite embarrassing, right? There was a survey that talked about we are the second most country where people hate their jobs. The first one is
Was it a
Australia, which is
recent-
right, the
a
recent
recent
survey,
survey?
right?
Yeah, I think.
Australia, which was I thought that was really an irony, right? Australia is number one. I'm like, knock off early and go to the beach. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm like, but I was like, wow, it's just not something to be proud of. We got to do better.
I think leadership today is very different, right? Remember the time of Lee Kuan Yew, Machiavellian kind of leadership, right? It's better to be feared than to be loved,
Yeah.
right? And then now everybody's talking about love, right? And a lot about caring. One of the things that you guys mentioned just now, which I struggle with very personally, is actually letting go. Like, you said, you don't want to be the smartest in the room. I do not think I'm smart at all. In fact, I want people to be smart as well. But there is that perfectionist or that OCD-ness in me, right? And I cannot let go, So like, you see how the meeting is going, and then you're like,
It needs
guys,
to go
just
this way.
this, okay? And it's done, right? It's done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've improved a lot, right? But I just want to, make it apparent and bring to light that it's easier said than done.
One of the art I'm still trying to figure out and still trying to refine is that you actually have the solution, right? You are resisting trying to say out the solution. How do you incept it in someone else to make it feel like it's their idea and let them say it and own it, right?
That's
so
true.
this has been something I'm practicing, and it's quite fun, right? Making people feel like, hey, you've arrived at the answer, it's great, it's your solution, right? Good, own it, right? So this has been something I've learned, right? Trying to influence people to think like me and to own the solutions. And then therefore I can let go after that, right? I think beyond that, I think it comes back to the culture, right? A lot of it is culture, being very clear on what's your mission, what the goals, what the values.
Yeah.
When these things are well codified, right, it actually gives people that space to actually
Yeah.
have autonomy,
Yeah.
right? So you already said this is the metric you want, this is when you need to hit it by, this is how we want to do it. I just trust that you would do it, right? If you fail to do it, after that, then it's my responsibility to coach you to figure out why. Is it because I didn't put the right context? Is it because I didn't give you the right resources? Is it because it was a very ill-defined goal, too airy-fairy for you to kind of take action on? So that's been my kind of approach, trying to give people context, giving people the mission, and then giving them the trust to do it. And after that, coach together them through the solution.
Yeah.
Takes longer time, to be honest. But I find that it frees up our mind as leaders, because I don't have to worry about you anymore. You're now effectively self-replicating and doing it with your downlines and all that.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing about structure quite a bit, right? I mean, there needs to be some structure and rules in place. Do you think that it's possible to actually ever have a flat hierarchy?
This is just my own personal experience. Actually, people don't want that. My guys are not expecting flatness. They still want leaders.
Yeah.
They still want someone to care for them. They still want someone to take care of them, sayang them, all that. They definitely want more accountability, but they want access. They want communication. They want to be able to speak their mind and not feel that there's a hierarchy they must transcend, right? But the flip side is true also. Hierarchy for the sake of hierarchy. Also not quite right thinking. This hierarchy should actually follow the organization trying to design to make a system work.
You need hierarchy because of accountability, right? So people are hired into the roles because of what they're accountable for. You can't change that. I think what people are looking for is, in terms of flat, is more around relationally. Is this an organization where if you are the leader, do I need to kind of go through a few doors to get to you, or can I just go to you? Relationally, is there a place where we can all relate to each other? And I think that's what you want, right? I mean, when I first came into my team, on the first week, I basically told them, I just said, and then I started meeting everyone, but basically I just told all the way down to the most junior officer, I said, if you have an issue, come and talk to me. If you have an issue that somehow your reporting officer or whoever above you, for some reason you can't speak to them, either they're blockading you, or you just don't feel comfortable, you can talk to me. But then it's up to me to actually then, if I am alerted to kind of manage it well, such that I can bring up those situations where one doesn't get saboed, the other one doesn't get embarrassed, right? So I think that's what people want. People want the ability to not feel trapped, to be able to reach out. But in the end, you need hierarchy because you need who's responsible for what.
Has there ever been a time where you question your own values as a leader?
In the course of doing business, sometimes I feel that there are times where your integrity is put to the test. For me, when we run a global business in technology, and sometimes when we work with the developing nations, right, things where there is on the table kind of like, hey, I'll give you this project, because I'm from this government sector, but you know what? I really like that, watch that I saw, at this mall, it'll look nice on me, do you want to give me a present, And this is when, as a leader, right, that could spell the doom, even though at that moment, right? So I feel that is one thing as well, the value and having good integrity as a leader, and this is of course with a business context. I think just in the last year or so, we've actually seen in the news so many leaders have fallen from grace, right? And one of the things that has impacted me a lot is it's not so important how you start, but it's more important how you finish. I mean, you can have the most amazing start, but if you finish badly, it's just horrible, right? And I don't want to just name all the companies, but it's in the news, right? You guys could read it. There are a lot of leaders who have been fantastic, and when a leader falls, you take the followers with you because you have kind of just smashed that beautiful image, and some of the things that you were fighting for just seem so ludicrous, right? And these people would lose their faith in whatever you were championing, right? Be it integrity, be it workplace safety, and whatever, right? So yeah, I think that those are my thoughts on values.
And actually, what you said was truly. One of my earliest bosses basically told me this. He says, it's not how you start, Mark, it's how you end. And that gave me a lot of context because it's so easy to want to go for the quick win, right? Early on, right? Because whatever will give you like that quick kind of route. But to play a long game, it really makes sense when the older you get, I guess.
So you mean what kind of legacy you want to leave?
No, absolutely, right? And people remember you and how you end. No one remembers you how you start.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think on that point, because it's a long game, right? And you have to be consistent through not only one season but multiple seasons, right? I think what I found helpful is that it's a lot easier if you're not acting.
Yeah.
So
that's
if it's something that comes from within, you believe in it.
Yeah. So
not
you
pretending.
Practice,
No, that's true, man.
It's a little bit easier in the long to keep that going long run. Of course, you could make mistakes. That's natural. We're only human, right? But at least you're not putting a facade.
Yeah.
Right? So
true.
And the interesting thing when we talk about values, I did the whole exercise very early on, started the company, whiteboard, what are the values, right? Run a lot of things, but we actually eventually arrived at things that we believe that even if we're not thinking, if we're shack on a shack day, at least these are the values that even you're looking at a shack person, or shack Vincent, you will see this. At least some of these values still hold true. It wouldn't be like, oh, shack already, then all of a sudden you become, your real self, right? So I think that matters. And then where, of course, some values are a bit more aspirational. So one of the values that we have is that we want to assure the world. And to assure the world first, we need to assure our own people. right? This is a high standard. It means like I want to leave in you a feeling as my employee or as my colleague, the feeling of assurance, right? So what that means is since it's not a normal behavior, I mean, of course, care kind of adds to that. It's about being conscious of it. So one of the things my preoccupation throughout the day is that when we talk about values in action, right, or at least values personified, if this is a value that we find important as a company, what's the situation today in which I can so-called put myself to that standard and showcase that, right, and then emphasize it to the team, right, so that they can see that it's real.
I think if you can lead or go to work with a clear conscience, that's actually very freeing.
Yeah.
That's freedom, man. Because there are many people who keep on who maintain a facade. They think they have to or whatever. And I've literally had friends tell me like, oh, in that environment, I had to be this way because that was the only way I thought I would survive. But oh my God, that's just a tiring way to live.
So I think we are running out of time. So let's just wrap up the discussion. So my final question for the three of you is, what kind of leaders should we be post-pandemic?
I think, because of the pandemic, it's kind of made me a lot more conscious as a leader. Because you can't see, right? So you have to imagine, what's this person going through? What's the other person going through? What's in that person's mind? I can't see the body language. So it's forced me to be a lot more conscious. No full stop. Is it person, of course, it's exaggeration, right? But it's really being conscious. And the second thing to that is being deliberate. There's one thing to know, but you actually have to act on it. And so I think maybe I'm not sure how you're doing. Being deliberate means, okay, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to take action to talk to you. And then find out is what I'm thinking about your situation true? And then you can share me the real story, right? So being conscious, being deliberate. Yes, these are things we did beforehand. But beforehand, we could rely on a lot more other rituals, physical, casual context to do it. But what I found myself in the pandemic is, I had to be deliberate. If I'm not going to message the person, I won't bump into the person in the corridor to ask how he is. I need to actually manufacture these things. Yeah.
Not sure whether they are more so post-pandemic, but definitely important. One, I think needing vision is important, right? Because vision is tied to purpose. So I think that's important. People need to know why they're with you. The second one is probably going to be around, I think authenticity is important, being relatable and also just hoping that means that people can also be comfortable with who they are, right? Because then that sort of puts down that need for sort of second guessing and all that, right? And the third one, I think, to pick up on what you said, was probably around kind of care lah. Yeah, and yeah, I think this whole issue about care and it's a funny word, but I think kind is important. Yeah, care and kindness.
That's a word we haven't used yet.
Yeah, kindness, I think is important. Yeah, because so the two things, right? You need vision because if not, people don't know what they're doing. But also, I think you need kindness lah, because people will make mistakes and no one's perfect and people need a break.
I actually had kind as one of my words as well, right? So I think that's the EQ part, right? The emotional quotient part, the part that lumps together empathy, right? The part that also has caring involved, and it just brings a smile to your face when you think of a kind person, right? Another one will be patience, right? I think right now you can reach anyone like that, and sometimes you expect people to respond like that as well, right? And all of us here know that haste makes waste, so let's not be hasty, right? And I guess the last one would be present, being present, right? How many times have we been on a video call where the video is not turned on and we're actually replying an email while your colleague is speaking? Guilty as charged. Right?
Guilty too.
Even when the video is on, guilty as charged. Sometimes.
It's like, what you looking at?
My boss is going to listen.
Oh, sorry. But it really takes something for me to so easy to really go it's a half an hour presentation from my colleague.
Wow.
Just give him that undivided half an hour attention. All right.
I learned that.
What are you presenting?
Yeah.
And on that chat, ask questions and stuff. So those are my few things.
It's good.
All right. Thank you so much for the discussion.
Yeah.
I really liked how everybody had kind of bounced off each other's ideas and
I learned a
replies.
lot from you guys.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Same here, man. Yeah, it was fun.
So we'll proceed to the Q&A now. We have about 8 minutes to do the Q&A, so I think
Okay.
we will take maybe 1 or 2 questions.
All right.
Sounds good.
Let's see what we have from the chat box. Okay, so we have a question from Vinod. So Vinod's question is to any of the panelists, so any of you can take this up. How do you balance empathy with performance? So all's good when performance is not compromised, but when people aren't delivering or are not on the ball, how do you handle such a situation?
I'll take it then. Well, you just have to be the bad guy, lah. And you need to put your foot down when you need to put your foot down, and you need to chide when you need to chide, right? I think there is a process, like I think what Vincent said just now, right? Giving the context, giving the resources, having a communication. Is this realistic, or is it airy-fairy goal? Right? And if all parties have agreed that this is something achievable and you set out measurable steps to achieve it and it's not being achieved, then maybe a warning or a second warning, and if that's not good enough, then maybe a serious talk like, maybe this role really isn't for you, But that's another thing. We're all talking about the nice stuff about leadership. There's also the stuff that nobody wants to be involved in, right? That I think we didn't talk about as much. Yeah.
I find it important to bring back this question of why, right? Why on 2 levels. The first why is like, why are we doing what we're doing, right? It's to realign that actually, I care for you as a person, but this is what we're all in the journey for, what we're trying to achieve. So you agree with it, I agree with it, okay, you understand it. So that's the context and why we are having this feedback on your performance, right? And the second why is, why do you think you weren't able to hit this, right? My first assumption there is that, is this something that the company didn't do or set the right structure such that it resulted in this failure? Because for me, fundamentally, everything is a leadership problem, right? If you fail, probably somewhere along the line, I'm probably responsible for it at some point in time, right? So it's because it's not clear, too approximate, not enough resources, unrealistic. But that all said, you and I can both agree that while I care for you and I want to understand why, we are going for the same thing, right? And therefore, you and I can agree that you can do better. I can also agree that I can do better to help you do better, right? So I like to talk about those 2 levels because it creates alignment. And the second thing, it really helps to drive home, maybe it's not your fault, maybe it's actually my fault, right? And maybe I can also improve myself as a leader so that you can get better in hitting the performance.
It's an interesting perspective that you said that most of the problems is because of the leader, right? It starts from the leader.
Yeah, I mean, it's indirect and direct. Like, someone behaved this way, oh, but we have this value, oh, but you didn't communicate it, you didn't drive it, so the person didn't behave that way, right? The person didn't hit the target by 50%. 50% is a big number. Do you set an unrealistic target? Do you clarify? Do you monitor along the way, right? So just as there's a reason to always push blame to everyone else, if you take the lens that everything's a leadership problem, there's also a reason to find everything to blame yourself on that front, right? It's not to put pressure on yourself, but just recognize that as leaders, we are accountable, right? Yeah.
I think you can address that question around empathy and versus performance by building that into the system. So within the service, actually, you are assessed on your performance based on what you do and how you do it. So if you're clear about what you do, which is performance, right? And you know that as long as, and I think we all can be better, but as long as you lay that out clearly, people know if they achieve this, they should get that. And one should be rewarded for performance. But they also know that as a factor to that is how you do it. Then, right, they also know that, hey, that alone could give me full scores, but if how I do it is bad, I'm going to get a low score, right? So I think you can build that into the system, and then it starts to set up a culture of, it is not just what we achieve, it's also how we achieve that's important, right? And then people would adjust, or people will pay more attention, because there is actually tangible rewards from that, or tangible, or things that you will not be rewarded for that. Yeah.
So we have another question from Tan Zihan. So Zihan would like to do a shout out to you, Mark, because I think you are former colleagues and collaborators. So his question is, what has been the toughest leadership decision you've had to make? For example, laying off staff, cutting pays, choosing someone over another.
Yeah.
This is not just a question from Mark, actually.
Thanks,
It's
man.
for all of you.
Yeah. It wouldn't be specific, but okay, I think the toughest decisions I've had to make was when you realize some people are not in the best fit, and you have to just be quite honest about that so that they can move on. And life's like that, right? Sometimes people come to their own realization and then they say, you know what, this is not the best fit for me, and I move. And others, to be honest, sometimes that decision needs to be made for them, or which then later, hindsight, they'll realize, you know what, that person did me a favor by just telling me that, sticking around is not going to be good for the organization, and neither is it going to be good for me. And I think that's always the toughest, when you actually have to, in a way, kind of make that decision for them, or at least start to initiate this, which is hard to hear. And it's just how you do it in a way that's still honorable, but yet you can't escape the fact, you don't have the right skills, and this is really not, this thing is maybe too big for you to handle, and let's just have an honest, maybe you're best somewhere else. And those are always very difficult conversations. Yeah.
I mean, I echo the exact same as what Mark, right? That's really the toughest. I go more and share, like, I've had the experience of, not allowing myself to not make the decision because I'm procrastinating. I don't want to make a decision, right? And I want the person to come to realization, right? So I drop a lot of hints, but the person does not. Right? And actually it backfires. It becomes actually toxic. Right? And,
good point.
And then sometimes there is that fear of letting go again, right? Because change. But I tell you, once that is gone, that person is gone, wow, actually it's so much better.
Yeah.
Suddenly you realize that actually that was a blockage for other people who could rise, but this was the glass ceiling that was there.
Yeah.
Right?
So to just add to that, this is issue about care, right? Because, are you not being caring to that person? No, but actually you're not being caring to everyone else around that person. Yeah. So I think, someone had gave me very good advice some years back. It says the leader is only as strong as what he or she is willing to tolerate.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, if I didn't make the decision, I'm tolerating, and I'm basically hurting a lot of people who are having to tolerate that, right? Because everyone knows it's not a good fit. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. I think letting go of people is one of the hardest things for leaders to do, especially if you espouse care.
Yeah, especially espouse. If you don't, then it's fine. You're a digit, right? Get out, right?
So in our company, so much so that we realize how difficult it is. We actually, for my leaders who have to do that, I tell them firstly, it's a traumatic experience. It's okay. But it's okay. Right? I know it's going to be traumatic for you. I'm here for you. Let's go through it together, right? And then we bring back the values, right? We have to do this anyway, right? It's the right thing to do, objectively from the business. But how do we do it in a way which is consistent with our values, such that you have a good conscience, knowing that you lived in line with the values of the company, but you did the right thing as a leader for both the company, as well as the individual, right? So I think going through that coaching process with my leaders to go through that traumatic experience together, we've turned into it's not something you want to celebrate, but we do take it as a badge of honor, right? You've gone through that, it's difficult, good job, right? You've kind of exercised that leadership. Because it is one of the toughest things to do.
It's the toughest,
right?
And you never really get used to it, right?
I think as a
It gets
person who cares,
easier
you're
a
not
little
supposed
bit,
to. I don't know if you're supposed to.
I think you will come to a realization after a while that people will maybe pass through your organization as part of their journey, and some people would stay longer with you, and it just depends. Right? You can't make everyone stay. Not everyone's meant to stay. Not everyone's right. So I think it gets easier.
part of the
actually, it's still
journey.
tough, lah. It's still tough.
I mean,
I
you
stress out a lot
develop
about
coping
it, yeah.
mechanisms and principles, but it's never supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
Right?
I think if you care, it's never easy.
Yeah.
Because you care, what?
Yes. It's like, I don't love you anymore, but let's be friends.
Bye, right?
Yeah.